a story I call Broken. It's about a 6-year-old boy who comes into foster care and ages out and goes straight into um, teen prostitution. It is a very hard story to hear. It will make you mad. Um, but the good news is he turns out to be such a great, warm-hearted, um, I want to say young man. He's younger than I am, so I guess I'll say young man. Um, so it's kind of long. It's got lots of triggers. Um, but I think that it's a story that really needs to be heard.
So, Mike, tell me all about yourself. Tell me why you wanted to be interviewed.
Of course. Well, I'm originally from California. I grew up in a little area called Lakewood, which is near Long Beach. Currently, I'm in Denver, Colorado, an actual suburb called Aurora, though. And most likely in 2 months, I'm moving to a Chicago suburb. It's going to be a completely different scene.
And why are you going to move?
We'll have an opportunity to be a caretaker there. So a live-in caretaker, and which includes room and board. And then if I get a part-time job, that's all pretty much savings and stuff. So it's going to be a good opportunity to kind of get out of the hole that I'm in.
Yeah, and you work in healthcare, basically?
I was what?
You work in healthcare?
I've had to carry 2 jobs here. So I was working for a spa until I was laid off. And then I was a caretaker for a couple agencies. We deal with people with like physical disabilities, elderly. The most recent, I worked in memory care. So I was at a living facility for people with pre-dementia, Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
Takes a lot of patience, I'll tell you.
Yeah, I direct kids in theater, and we take our little plays down to them at Christmas time. And
I love that. I'm a big theater fanatic myself, so.
Me too. That is my outlet. Is it your outlet? Do you actually perform?
Not since I was younger.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that you bring it up. I've been considering wanting to get into small town theater. The town I'm moving to is St. Charles, and they have a bunch of different options out there. So not something I want to take too serious, but I certainly want to do it. I've been involved in sort of the drag scene. Never been a drag queen, always was in male form, but I just love the whole idea of bringing a character to life. It's fascinating.
And I think it's interesting. A lot of people that I interview that have come out of the foster system use theater, especially, as an outlet.
Totally. I can totally understand that. My foster sister, who was their real child, she was a child actress. So I was always having to relay her lines to her on our way to auditions and stuff. So it's always kind of been in my heart and something I've appreciated.
Are you close to your foster sister still?
Gosh, no. When I was emancipated at 18, I pretty much went from living in their beautiful home to living across the street at the park. Very difficult situation, but I think it was also the best thing to happen because of how horrible their control and abuse was. That for me, it was the most exciting but also most fearful thing to happen to me. At 18, I had no idea how to take care of myself. I didn't know about avenues to go to. I barely even knew how to apply for a job. And so that was scary, but it was also the first time I had a chance to actually be myself. So it was a weird situation, I'll tell you, but I learned a lot from it.
How long were you with them?
I was with them since I was 6 years old. So most of my childhood, they're all I knew as a family.
Wow. And then at 18, so why were you not adopted?
That's the funny thing is I don't understand that either, because I actually had a chance to be adopted with my brother and sister and their adoptive family. And they actually went to court over it to try to bring me into their home. But for some reason, my foster family wanted to fight that. And they won. I think, I had a choice in the situation. And also being groomed to think that they were what's best for me, I believe I was in support of it as well. But I think the best thing that could have happened was being adopted.
But they never brought up adopting you in all that time?
Oh, no, they did. They talked about it, but it never happened. So I'm not sure if they were truly sincere about it or not. But again, when I do little checks on them, I'm close to some of their family. So my foster mother's sister and her family, I'm close to. We talk on the phone, we talk on the internet, and they don't get along as both families. It's more so my foster mother's fault, just because she's so competitive, and you can imagine sisters being competitive. But at a certain point, it actually stopped them from being close to each other. And I get little hints of what's going on in my foster family's life through them. They still haven't adopted. They have multiple foster kids since I've left. And I just don't think it was something they were sincere about.
It's interesting that they kept you for so long without that.
It was funny because they always had that threat. Whenever I'd complain about something that I knew wasn't right, they'd always say, well, it's this or a group home. And they gave me idea of group home as being some horrible prison-like state of living. And I still think a group home would have been healthier than having lived with them. There was a lot of good things about their family, but the majority of the things that actually matter in your childhood and growing up were not. You know, she had the most beautiful home in Lakewood. I learned gardening through her. I was always picking the weeds. But when it came to things like opening a bank account, balancing a checkbook, getting a job, looking for social services that can help your transition from foster care into adulthood, they were non-existent in that department.
So how did they prepare? How did they prepare you when if you knew you weren't going to be adopted, you knew that 18 was coming? What did they do differently to prepare you for leaving the system?
They didn't. And if you understood how I truly lived there, I literally spent every day of my life sitting in a corner. And I'm not exaggerating on that. Every single day of my life, I had a spot. I had to sit Indian leg style and staring at the wallpaper or reading a book. And this was all the way up to the age of 18. So they never had a plan for me. They kept it in such a controlling way that I think I would have had more freedom and opportunity if I had lived in a prison. I can still, to this day, draw that wallpaper exactly as I remember it, because it was my spot every day. I was never allowed to stand up. I was never allowed to just go to the bathroom whenever I needed to. I was never allowed to just go get some water when I wanted to. Everything was completely controlled. I wasn't even allowed to speak unless I was spoken to. Those were very strict rules. Unless I had a very important question to ask, I wasn't just allowed to carry a conversation with the people in the family. And for me, being that it was over 12 years that this was my life, I was groomed to feel like this was normal. That was all that I knew. And they never had a plan for me to transition out. And, there was an opportunity to work at Job Corps, which was a training facility. They didn't even allow me to do that. And I think it could have helped a lot. And I think it would have prevented that whole being homeless situation, because you live at Job Corps, they teach you a career like nursing or something. And, I've heard a lot of success stories from foster children that graduated from there.
Why do you think they decided to be foster parents?
I'm sorry?
Why do you think that these people decided to be foster parents?
My foster mother, her mother had her own children, and she also raised foster kids along with them. And I know that there's some bitterness that I've been told from my foster aunt about my foster mother. She feels bitter towards the system because she felt like it took away from her. I don't know many of the stories growing up, but one thing I do remember is my foster grandmother was a really good woman. She was a strong Christian. Um, I miss her to this day. And she was just very different than my foster mom. She was in it for the right reasons. And I don't think my foster mother was in it for the right reasons, but I don't know her heart. I can't say that that's fact. But my foster mother was a show business type of woman. She liked to parade her kids around. It was for show, and in some ways she did really good at it. But I think she was in it for the wrong reasons, to be honest. Maybe that's changed. I don't know.
So,
And I also think she was in it for the money. I know people don't get rich off of being a foster mother, but they do get paid. And they qualify for a lot of other assistance programs, like food and discounts on certain needs. And I think she really used that into her favor, because anytime that there was a check sent for the 12-something years that I lived there, I never got any of that. It was spent on her own kids. Just like when the state sent me a big one of those original Apple desktop computers. She picked out a purple color and gave it to her daughter.
even though she was very comfortable, their life was very comfortable already.
Oh yeah. My foster dad, I bless him. In some ways, he could have put his foot down and said that certain things were wrong, but he was a hard worker, and he would work 6-7 days out of the week sometimes as a truck driver. And what she would do is she'd just go take the money and she'd spend it all on the kids. Her garage from bottom to top was full of nothing but years and years and years of her collecting things and just toys and knickknacks and stuff. And it was obviously she has a problem with shopping and stuff. And it didn't change when she became a foster mother either, because that was more money for her to use. I remember them going to like Las Vegas on weekends, which was one of the only problems that my foster grandmother did. She would take those checks. She had like 8 boys at once in her big house. And she'd go to Las Vegas on what we call the blue bus. It's where all the elderly ladies hop on the bus and they go to Las Vegas together. And she'd get broke almost every other time, but then sometimes she'd win and she'd take everybody out to dinner, not thinking of the fact that all of your foster kids are wearing used hand-me-down clothes. When you have enough money from each child to at least give them a couple new outfits a year, everything was handed down to them. And I think even in a sense that was something that she was taking advantage of for certain.
And was that the same for you, or did she dress you up in public? And
I never had hand-me-down clothes, but I would wear the same outfit for almost 4 days in a row. And keep into mind, outfits were always picked out. I could never just go to my bedroom or dresser, which wasn't even really my bedroom, and pick out what I wanted to wear for the day. All the way until the age of 18, that was never an option for me. So it was always handed out. And she was a stylish person. She knew how to dress kids. I'll give her that. But I never had a say in what it would be. I never had a say in, oh, I like that. That's what I would like to wear. This matches my personality. I remember trying to ask that, even for my hairstyle. And nope, it was all about what she thought was right.
so, did you know, all of this time that you were gay?
I started to question it at probably around 16 years old.
Okay.
I had feelings younger, but I also had crushes on girls too. I think it was more of an emotional crush versus a physical crush. When I would see guys, that was a whole different feeling. But I was also raised in such a controlling home that even trying to have a boyfriend or make friends in the gay community would have never been possible. Um, it it never could have happened. But there was a time about 16 that I started to really feel like this is who I am, that I'm different. And I remember asking them what it means to be gay, and they would tell me about the hell and the Bible and what that means to them. Oh, you're not gay. But I remember when they caught me doing something physically to myself in my room, they told me, you can't do that. That's gay.
So
Yeah.
basically every single male on the planet and many, many female.
That's what was gay to them. But when I would ask them if my feelings were gay, oh no, you're not gay. You're not gay.
How would they even know if you just weren't even allowed to talk?
Because I don't think it's something that they can accept. I think they seem like hypocritical Christians in many ways. They did teach me about the Bible and Jesus, and to this day I consider myself a Christ-saved person. But they would go to church. It would be all about the big dress that they just created for their daughter to wear to church. It wasn't about the message that the church was spreading. And I wasn't allowed to go to church. Their excuse was that I only wanted to go to church because they had free donuts after the service.
That's why a lot of children would want to go to church, actually.
Maybe I would have felt that way when I was younger, as a young child.
Yeah.
But it was never my mindset as a teenager, oh, if I go, I get a free donut.
Right.
And it was just so weird to me that they would use that against me. They loved parading me around.
Yeah.
Sometimes I was brought to set when she couldn't bring me to her mother's house to be watched. She'd bring me onto the set of whatever show that my sister's doing or commercial. And they loved parading me around. I was a cute kid when I was younger. But to not go to church, it just didn't make sense to me. But they would certainly drill me about hell. I remember being told, probably around 17 years old, that I'm going to hell, that I now belong to the devil. And it still has affected me over the years, but I've come to a sense of my own peace. And I don't accept that type of hatred. I don't think it's right. And it's certainly something that you don't tell a child.
Right. And why did they say that? Why did they say you were going to hell?
Again, I think that stemmed off of the behavior that I was doing physically to myself.
Okay.
It was never in front of everybody.
Sure.
That was the case. But if you understood, I had to lay on my bed, flat on my stomach, my head to the right because that's where the wall was. They had 2 baby gates on my door and a motion detector. So anytime that I embarrassingly tried to do something that is obviously natural, the alarm would go off. But there was a time when I didn't know that there was somebody right there watching, and I was underneath my bed, my blanket. And she said out loud, "Are you having fun?"
Okay. So what brought you into care in the first place? How did you get into foster care?
I know that I was found with my brother and sister all by ourselves in a home. My foster mother was a prostitute in Las Vegas. She left me with her brother.
Your foster mother was, or your bio mother?
My biological mother, sorry.
Okay, it's okay. Yeah.
She left me overnight with her brother, my uncle, blood uncle apparently. That same night, he went to rob something with some friends. So not only did they arrest him, obviously, for that, rightfully so, but apparently, I don't know how we were found alone in that house. I don't know whether he told the cops we were there or something, but we were rescued that night from that situation, and they brought us into foster care. And we were separated, and I don't understand what that was. I think my brother and sister only half brother and sister. I'm
Mhm.
not sure. I could be wrong about that.
What are their ages? Are they younger?
I
Or,
I think my sisters, I was taken out of their home probably around 4 years old, and then we spent a couple years in foster home. So they got to only be a couple years younger.
okay.
David and Vanessa were their name.
And you don't have a relationship with them now, I'm guessing.
No, I attempted it and I tried it. First of all, I have been looking for them for years, especially after emancipation. That was my biggest goal, and I was trying to find my birth mom. And somebody I was dating back in West Hollywood, he ordered a private detective to find them. He didn't find my brother and sister because at the time they were still in foster care.
A closed adoption. Um, and so if it was, yeah, that's it. They become that family, and if they don't want you to know them, there's no
That
there's
makes
nothing you can
sense.
do with it.
But we did find my birth mother. She lived out in a town called Desert Hot Springs, which was like 4 hours away from West Hollywood. So I remember him taking me in with his private driver. He was a successful guy, but he sent me in with his private driver to go see them. And they were living in a trailer park. I didn't care. For me, it was like my dream to find her. And she was really sweet. We both cried when we got to meet each other. Um, she introduced me to all of her family. Everything was so sweet about that. Things started to change though when I told them that I was gay. And, they're Catholics and I respect that difference. Um, I remember wanting to leave West Hollywood to experience living with her. And I did. I ended up moving in with my birth mother. And because I wanted to experience what it was like to have that normalcy. Even at like 19, 20 years old, I was still very broken inside. And I thought that that was the answer to everything, was having that. It turned out to be probably one of the worst decisions I've made when it comes to family because they I wasn't allowed to go to any other church other than their Catholic church. That was like their house rule. So I went. It wasn't really my thing, but I went because it was my choice, or it was their choice. And in order to stay there, I had to kind of comply by that. But when they found out that I met somebody gay on a website, that gay person happened to be the doctor of my mother. It was somebody that she had worked for. I had no idea about this, but they caught me leaving their trailer park fencing, brick gate area, and going off. Apparently, all of the neighbors were watching and saw me drive off with this person that I went to lunch with. And when I came back, everything was different. They wanted me to leave, and they wanted me to leave that night, and I had to. So I ended up staying a couple doors down with somebody in their family. Oh, that was probably the worst thing that my mother said I could do, is staying with somebody in their family that they want nothing to do with, because they call it a cult. These were good people. They never knew me. They only met me a couple times in that trailer park. And they still brought me into their home and treated me kindly. And I was there for about a week. And my mother had the biggest fit. My whole family, not only did they already just turn on me because they forced me out of their home within a couple hours, then somehow this was even worse than me being gay because I chose someone in the family that they want nothing to do with, who they consider enemies. They had me beat up. I was attacked by my half brothers, the brothers that are from my mother but from her current husband at the time. And I'll never forget that feeling. They literally beat me up in front of that home that I was staying in. And that's when I knew I have to get out of here. And I ended up going back to West Hollywood for a couple days. One of my close friends at the time was living in New York City, and he thought the best thing I could do for myself was to move to New York. New York City was such an eye-opening experience. You know, I had already been living in West Hollywood for a handful of years. You know, I had already got an experience of what it like to be an adult. But New York City was a whole nother world for me. And for job opportunities, for arts and culture, and it's such a busy city that it was so easy to forget about what had just happened. Delicious food afterwards, which I won't complain. But it was so easy to make a living there. Besides what I had to do in West Hollywood.
So, so you just experienced rejection after rejection after rejection.
You won't even believe this, but I stayed in contact with my mother. On Facebook, she would just ignore me for months. The only way that I'd have to hear from her is if I messaged her. That I decided to have that big conversation with my mother. Why did all of this happen? How did I end up in these homes? You know, I wanted to know why. She refused to tell me. She said that you can't do this to me. You're hurting me by bringing this up. I said, I just need, you know, I needed a way to heal from this and move on and understand what this situation was about. And even this, being deformed my whole life on my left hand, and my left side of my body is smaller than my right. So I ended up having a lot more spinal pain the older that I get. She wouldn't even tell me why that had happened. And I knew why it happened. I remember being told that she did drugs while I was in her system. She denied all of that. And she refused to talk about it. And to me, that never made sense. It was like she was hiding from her past, not wanting to face it. You've had many years as a woman to get over your mistakes. Even forgive yourself. Your firstborn son, which is myself, I forgave her so many times. And I remember her calling me once, and it was a disgusting conversation. I remember telling her over the phone, and I thought it was, you know, just between me and my mother, that I had to be a prostitute out of foster care, because I was living on the streets before I ever made it up to West Hollywood. And she used that against me in her conversation. I remember her repeating that to my brothers and sisters in the back of that car. And I was kind of angry in that conversation too. But the whole reason of that phone call, and again, I didn't know they were there until she repeated those things to them, I could admit was to make her feel bad. I said, this is your fault. You've never apologized. I need to hear that. And she got really nasty over it. And when I told her that situation, she told all of them. These were kids. You know, some of them were like 8 years old. And I remember this sickening laugh, them all laughing at me. And she hung up the phone.
Did she hide from her family her past?
She tried to, oh yes, reasoning that her oldest kids, me and my two brothers from a different man, or brother and sister from a different man, we were separated because of her actions. Her drug use, her prostitution, her neglect, leaving us with he was not a victim of the system. She had plenty of opportunities. I remember having to go to court as a kid many times where she could prove herself to get her kids back. And the courts every single time felt that she was not stable enough to do it. So what did she choose to do? She can't have her kids back. She's going to have more kids with her current husband. So for me, that was really hurtful, that these kids got to have this normal life, normal experience, and she treats them as their own. But for me, she treated me as this outsider. And it felt no different than how I felt in foster care, that I was just the outsider and only the real kids matter in this situation. It wasn't until November of last year, and that's when I said a bunch of nasty things to her. I didn't say them to hurt her. I said them because I wanted no chance of being able to come back into that situation. In my mind, I knew I'd run right back in a couple months and forgive her and restart things over. I said some specific things that I knew that she would never say hi again or let me back in. And I did that for a reason. I knew I had to cut her off. It was a toxic feeling that she always gave me. So in November of last year, I cut it off. I haven't gone back. And I don't think I regret it. I think it was one of the best decisions I've made. Because no matter who she thinks she is, she may be a great mother to her current kids. Again, she wasn't my mother. And even with the sick abuse that I had to endure from my foster mother, to this day, I still love her and I still consider her my mother.
Yeah, I mentored a girl once who was in foster care, and it was a bad situation. I would pick her up, and I had wished I was old enough to, or solvent enough to take her into my own home, but I lived with like 6 people. And I remember her saying to me, you know, they're not the best people, but at least I have a roof over my head and food in my stomach. And I felt sick to my stomach hearing that, because kids should get more than that. You know, like they should have a lot more. And having been a foster parent, I know that you don't necessarily, like, every child isn't that perfect match, but you still need to give them that sense of home.
Wonderful home. You know, she provided a beautiful atmosphere. She treated her kids wonderfully. She loved them with all of her heart. So I maybe have been an outsider, but I got to watch it. I got to experience it, even though it wasn't towards me. So for me, it gave me a sense of normalcy, because besides the foster kid that they had a perfect family.
So sad. That is so sad. Oh my gosh, that's a hard one to hear. Okay. So let's talk about, hang on, I gotta do some stuff.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bring
No,
up.
I mean, that is exactly what I want to hear in these. I mean, it's just true, and it's really hard to hear that you observed from the outside. I did a very similar thing, but for me, it was, I watched Nickelodeon. I watched Nick at Night hiding under laundry loads of clothing so that my mom couldn't find me and beat me. And I would sit under them and watch 1950s housewives and go, I want a life like that. And I have a life pretty much like that now, except I'm a sucky house cleaner. But you know, you gotta find your oh gosh. Okay.
You know, you get to experience that normalcy through other avenues, through a TV show or through a book. You know, for me, it was ironic because I was reading Harry Potter, and okay, and get this, they never let me watch things. First of all, I wasn't allowed to just go walk up to their couch and watch TV with them. I had my spot. But when they would let me over occasionally, I wasn't even allowed to watch Pokemon because there was fighting, okay? And I wasn't allowed to watch Seventh Heaven because of some of the behavior that the kids would do. They claimed that I would try to mock that behavior. That mindset doesn't make any sense to me, but it is what it is.
It is.
But I remember for some reason being allowed to read Harry Potter. You know, these were Christians. You know, witchcraft and all of that was something that they would never accept. But I remember an actress that my foster mother was close to through my sister's career. She was very spiritual, and she said, no, this book kids can read, it's okay. That was my biggest escape, was reading those books, because that behavior, that treatment that, you know, Harry, the main character, endured from his aunt's family, I reflected so much with it that it was such an escape, and reading became such an escape no matter what book, because for me, it was one of the only things I was allowed to do in that spot.
That's why I think a lot of people go into theater. I know that was my thing. So it was just a matter of being able to be a totally different person in a totally different world. It was so
And
huge.
I also,
Go ahead.
and I think foster kids also, they have a lot of built up emotions. Most of them they have to keep inside. You know, I wasn't even allowed to cry. They would call me things. And, you know, I remember up to the age of 18 having crying fits. That's something you do when you're 5 years old. I was 18 years old standing in a corner having a crying fit like I was some toddler.
It takes effort to be cruel, you know, and it sounds like, I mean, it does. It sounds like the Dursleys. Like they took pride in being cruel.
When they always told me that I need to be thankful. You need to be thankful because you could be in a group home. Being around other foster kids would have been the best thing for me, because I would have people that I can correlate with, understand, you know. And so when they use this group home as some threat, it just at the time made sense because I had this horrible view of it. But as an adult now, I just think you kept me not only from a lot of good homes, you also kept me away from group homes, which still would have treated me better than you did. I had to bathe up until the age of 18. I wasn't allowed to take a shower. I'd have to use the used water from their child's bath. And I'd have to stand up naked in front of either my foster mother or my foster dad. And then sometimes they'd have one of their own children watch me. And it wasn't like a sexual thing. It's because they thought that somehow I couldn't handle to take a bath on my own. They said that I'd get into supplies. I remember them catching me once as a child when I snuck out of the room putting lipstick on. Well, they called me a child predator for putting lipstick on. It just didn't make sense to me. I loved Barbie dolls, first of all. And they'd always let their youngest daughter come over and play Barbie dolls with me. But one time I did that without their permission, and I got them all dressed up. And one of my siblings said that they didn't do that. It was me, and it was. And they told me that sneaking into my sibling's room to go play with Barbies makes me a predator. I started to almost believe that I was wrong for liking girls' things.
So were you able to see a therapist during this time?
I saw a therapist for a couple months, and it was because my social worker wanted it. But they quickly cut me off. My foster parents, they says, oh, you don't need it. It's not necessary. They had me on Ritalin and Adderall at the same time. I wasn't the perfect kid, but there was no excuse for them to not want me in counseling, not want me in therapy. I was obviously hurting a lot as a child. I mean, I always had nightmares about my mother, my real mother. Um, for some reason, they didn't think it should be allowed. It wasn't necessary. And my gut feeling as an adult now, when I'm able to look back and reflect, they didn't want me at a therapist because they knew that some of the things that they were doing to me would come out of the shadows. That therapist would find out about what they're doing and report it. Because I'll tell you, the moment I was out of that home on my own, I may have been homeless and I may have done things that I had to do to survive because I had predators in my life. At 18, I looked like I was 15 years old, so I knew I was being preyed on. Maybe not at the time. At the time, I had people in my life that were giving me money. They made me feel loved. They gave me attention.
And you really had no idea what love was.
No. And affection, a hug from somebody, that was so rare that to have that and to be paid for that was such an addicting experience. But I remember my foster family always telling me, oh, as soon as you're an adult on your own, you're going to be in jail, you're going to be in prison, you're a troublemaker. I've never been in jail. I've never been in prison. Besides the fact that in my early years, I had to work as a prostitute.
It sounds like you were in prison in that house.
But I had always told, for years, I've always said this one thing. I think I would have had more freedom in a prison than I had in that home. And I feel blessed that I was able to transition as well as I did. And I don't excuse prostitution. That was a disgusting thing. But that wasn't my choice at the time. I felt loved and I felt like this is my only option right now. I was able to get away from prostitution, yes. I was blessed. I found some really good job opportunities. I worked front desk at an entertainment company. My first job was working at Hollister. I got hired on the spot. And I feel blessed because I don't think it was all me, but I was able to go from that situation to fully taking care of myself. There was no issue in me learning how to get a job, how to apply. And I say it was God's blessing. I really believe God was looking out for me because I don't know how I could have gone through that to being able to do all of these things. And I I couldn't have gotten through all of that without God. He was my strength. And I may have joined different churches over the years. I give so much appreciation to the Mormon church. I'm not Mormon, but they were a big part of me getting off of the streets during that time. This is before I was a prostitute. They brought so much normalcy into my life. They are some of the best people you can ever meet, ever. They are such loving, until they find out you're gay, everything changed. But for me, they gave me enough normalcy that I was able to grow up, that I was able to learn to be an adult. It was only until I started talking about me being gay and I'd already knew when I was younger, but I thought for certain this is something that I could shut off. But when I started to tell them about it, then they no longer wanted me part of the church. I used to live with the bishop, and the bishop made me move out because I remember calling a suicide hotline called the Trevor Project. I didn't know that phone calls can be traced. It wasn't my experience level. It wasn't, you know, but I remember calling the Trevor Project and having a long conversation with them in tears. And they got me through that. But they found out about it and they asked me to leave. And, I was never part of the church after that again because I was back to being homeless. But I wasn't an emotional wreck like I was when I had just gotten out of foster care and homeless. Um, I may have faced a lot of problems like financial stability and all of that, which is obviously when I found this guy who runs this agency. I was so okay with it because I didn't know exactly how to get work, how to believe in myself. But I don't think I could have even handled that without a lot of stability that this church brought me. You know,
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful people. I try to not express a whole lot of faith only because I don't want to alienate anyone. You know, like if you go someplace and you pray and you say, "Dear Jesus," that alienates the Buddhists and the Muslims and the different different groups, and I don't want to alienate anyone.
always had nothing but love for other faiths.
Yeah.
There's, in my opinion, many faces of God. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think God presents himself in the way that you can understand most.
It stops us from being narcissistic. It stops us to being consumed with ourselves to believe in something that's higher than us, a higher purpose than just our own needs. I don't. That's what I've come to. That's the place that I'm at now. It could always evolve, but that's where I'm at now. Let's talk about boundaries and where you learn to set boundaries. Where did you find your self-worth? At what time? What was the experience that taught you that you had value?
I I guess it was at some point in West Hollywood. I think it was when I realized that I was pretty much on my own. You know, I think I had my self-worth after my birth mother threw me out when I had moved in with her. I started to realize that all I really have is myself. And I have to lean on that strength. And somebody's got to take care of you. And if you can't wait around for somebody else. And, I started to work hard. I started to apply for different jobs and dig myself out of that situation. But I also realized that career I was involved in, being a gay hooker, it wasn't bringing me love. I truly believed when I joined that company that I'm going to find somebody who loves me and we're going to become in a relationship. Because I did think highly of myself. I thought for certain this is what's going to get me a partner. I had craved to have a boyfriend since I was emancipated. I remember crying, laying in the bleachers, thinking, I just want somebody. I know that I can fix this if I have somebody in my life. But I learned also that you don't need a partner to fix you. You can fix yourself. And that's what I chose to do.
And what did that look like for you? What steps did you take to get out of the agency and to progress?
I just working multiple jobs. The problem with me was I didn't know how to handle stress. So when something would get too difficult or stressful, I would quit and I'd look for a different job. So I had multiple opportunities there. In the whole West Hollywood, I think it was also out of necessity. I didn't want to be part of that career anymore, that field that was only hurting me more than it was helping me. It was enough for me to save up to get my own apartment. And I thought from then on, this is it. I could have never saved money as a homeless person working a job if I can't even bathe myself. This job provided a room for me to stay in while I was seeing clients. So I was lucky enough to be smart enough to save. I saved and I got my first apartment in West Hollywood, right above Sunset Boulevard. And that for me was the answer. I now have stability. Now you can focus on what you need. And what I needed was a job And, you know, I just applied to different things, and some didn't accept me and then some did. And slowly over the years, I was able to learn to stick with something, to overcome stress, to, you know, learn how to find your center. Work's always going to be stressful. You know, work's not always going to be something you enjoy to do. But also, working as a gay hooker to having to work a real job was super difficult because there's no stress, or there was stress in the meeting new people, yes, having to be physical. But for me, it was the only time that I ever got to be physical with somebody. So for me, it was also feeling this void um, as a gay man, not being physical, not dating somebody. For me, it was sort of filling in those things. And it was such easy money. I mean, I was able to get my hair done on Rodeo Drive. I was shopping at the Beverly Center, and you know, I had so much that I could do with that money that it was very difficult to transition from that into working $10 an hour.
Okay, so you call it, I'm struck by that comment of easy money because I've definitely been in that place where I had no idea where rent was coming from, and definitely considered, you know, when I'm walking down the street in my hotel gear for working at the front desk of a hotel and hookers are looking at me like, what, get off my corner, you know. I've definitely thought I could make a little bit more money doing this, you know. I never went down that road, but I did have those moments of relying on a man or needing the company of someone, you know. But it never felt easy. It always felt like I was giving a little bit of myself that you can never get back. Just like, you know, you walk around a park and you see somebody that you had a one night stand with, and for me, I would feel not good about the fact that I just gave a part of myself away. Did you have those feelings?
Oh, I definitely did. I didn't. I guess for me, it it did hurt because I lost my virginity to a client. I'm never going to get that back. I never got to save that for a boyfriend or a partner. So when I say that it was easy money, it was easy in the sense that it was quick. It was a couple hours or an hour. The emotional toll it took on me, it still affects me. There's no denying that. But I think when I say easy money is, how can somebody make $300 in one day just by seeing one person or at a job, a real job? It was impossible. So that's what I meant in that. But there was certainly an emotional toll. The biggest toll it took on me was sometimes not feeling good enough. It was such a competitive field. There's always somebody cuter or more attractive. You know, I remember that being the hardest thing to deal with, is starting to have a negative idea of myself physically when somebody else would get chosen above me. And I was like, why? What's wrong with me? You feel like a piece of meat and you feel so replaceable. And that replaceable feeling was the same thing I felt with my mother and my foster mother. I met a partner through that field. He was a director. I got to see so many exciting things in that field that it was so addicting. I did it for years. Where else can I go to a premiere for a movie? I got to do that because of the people I met through this agency. So in my head, I was doing the right thing. I was living the life, as it's called. You know, I got to go to big Hollywood type parties. It was until that boyfriend was cheating on me with somebody who became my ex-best friend. I realized that I can't do this anymore because there's always going to be somebody else around the corner. Now, he did help pull me out of that lifestyle for a little bit, but I only became his. And I was since a piece of his property. And it was so easy for him to go flirt with people right in front of me. And then to walk in on him cheating with somebody, that crushed my heart because this was my first partner. I believed him when he said that you're better than that field. Well, if I'm better than that field, why are you cheating on me?
Have you been able to find love since then? Like an actual relationship?
I did have one partner for about 6 months. His name was David. In my heart, I know that he was my first true, authentic boyfriend we knew, whereas David was probably like 2 years younger than me. It was real love. Um, it was such an intense love too. Um, we'd go to Malibu and go to Paradise Cove together and just be able to sit together for hours. I loved him. But this man knew what my past job was, and he still loved me. He never judged me, and we never cheated on each other. I remember him finding out later on that he was dating this woman. This is a gay man. He's not straight. But he did it to appease his family and his legacy, whatever you want to call that. You know, again, I felt replaced again. I hate that feeling of being replaced. I didn't have a boyfriend since. It's now 13 years later, and I haven't had a partner. It's not like I haven't tried. Um, it just hasn't worked out.
You seem like a great person. I'm sure, you just have to be in the right place. I was like, there's work to do, because that feeling of being replaceable probably won't ever completely go away. But there might be someone at some point who, you know, believes in your worth and believes that you are a treasure, not to be taken for granted. I hope so.
Don't get me wrong, I've had lots of dates. One thing I've learned, though, is to not tell them about that past job in West Hollywood because so many people judge it. And I've literally ruined myself socially sometimes by being open and honest. This is something that I overcame. I should be proud of that survival. But
Absolutely.
some people can't understand what it's like to be in those shoes, to feel like you don't have any other option but to do that. I learned a lot from it. It's not who I am as a person. It was just part of my lifelong lesson I've been happy to learn.
Well, and let's go to that point. Let's go to, what do you believe could have been in place to have made that not have to be part of your lesson? Because the reality is that you did what you had to do to survive. People can judge it, people can be pious and whatever, but if they've never walked the footsteps of somebody who has been invisible, it is incredibly powerful to have anybody want you. You got to do what you got to do, and
But
for anyone to judge who's never been in that place, they're out of line. Because I would argue that for you to be where you are now means that what would you have done with those extra opportunities? You know, a lot of people are where they are because parents have paved the way, or because there was, for a lack of a better term, and I don't like this word, but there was privilege in their lives. You know, that you talk about people who have not been given privilege. It's those of us that have spent our lives invisible. But I mean, it really comes down to the point that we don't have the opportunities to start life with. So what do you think could be fixed there?
Well, first of all, I think social workers need a major check. My social worker never gave a crap about what I was going through, barely ever asked me about anything in my life. But if somebody truly cared about bad behavior, they would try to learn what's the reason behind it. And they're the social worker. They should have more power than the foster parent. When the social worker recommends counseling, the foster parent shouldn't be able to take that away. Because when I was emancipated, I was on the street. I didn't have any paperwork from my foster care. I heard when you're 18, you're supposed to get the file that tells you all about what happened to you. I didn't get anything. I didn't even get an ID. I had to go apply for an ID. You know, I had a bag full of a couple pieces of clothing. I didn't leave with any food. They didn't even give me bread to leave with. You know, where was the social worker during the emancipation process? So because I'm a certain age, I no longer matter to you.
What year did you age out?
That was 2002.
And there was no process to build up. So there was
No,
nothing to prepare you for it. And was it literally like on your 18th birthday?
it was a couple days after that.
A couple days after your birthday. And you were just, you don't have a place anymore. Can you draw a picture of that day? Can you remember it? Or like, have you blocked it out? Or
The same day I left was the day I was standing in the corner having a crying tantrum because they were mistreating me. And I remember threatening to leave. I says, I'm just going to run out. I'm not going to deal with this anymore. They decided that, then you know what? Then it's time for you to leave. If you can't appreciate what you have here, I remember them saying that. If you can't appreciate what you have here, you don't deserve it. And I'll never forget that first evening. I felt so much pain because I was living, first of all, across the street at the park. I could look at the park and see the housing row right across from me, even though they were the housing row behind it. I got to see all these families, you know, running out, their dad, and people eating dinner. And it truly hit home to me that evening that I'm now on my own. I never had a family. And this might never change. At the same time, I may have been very scared and fearful, but I was also so excited. I was free. I remember having to steal from the grocery store to eat. And I was stealing Lunchables because I felt that they were the most sensible. You know, that was just my mindset. I don't even know why that grocery store never tried to have me arrested. Because I remember they have a recycling bin for customers to put their recycle bags in. And I had this idea that if I pick those bags out and bag my groceries and walk out, it will look as if I bought them. And it worked. It kept me alive. I was never selfish. I never stole things like cake or candy, or I just wanted to eat. And I am so thankful because I knew that there was somebody in that grocery store that was probably watching me. And they didn't say anything.
you know, a lot of people are stealing alcohol, right? And other things. And I think that if you saw a person who probably didn't have it all together, stealing a Lunchable, and you had any decency, you might let that pass, I would think. So that first night, did you have a sleeping bag? Did you have, I mean,
No.
how'd you stay safe?
I remember learning that if you use black plastic, it's an insulator. This was me remembering something about survival during one of my classes somewhere in high school. I don't even know what class it was. Maybe it's something I saw in a movie in school. But one of the things I did steal was a little box of black trash bags. And it really kept me warm. It insulates the heat. That was what I was sleeping on. And I was also so scared of people knowing I was homeless. And I laugh now because I'm like, that is so stupid. If I had made it more obvious, somebody would have reached out to me. I was so trying to make everything look perfect. You know, I would do my hair every day. I didn't want people to think I was homeless. For some reason, I cared more about what they thought of me than what I needed. Because if you see a homeless child who looks like he's 15, you contact somebody. You call an agency, you call the police, you do something because they'll know what to. In my opinion, 18 years old is a child. You're not an adult. You need to learn to be an adult before you're not a child anymore. I ended up having to sleep in the bleachers at night. No one would see me. It was safe, and it was a flat surface to sleep on. One morning, though, I got caught by the park service people, the ones who take care of the park, and they made me leave. I was so embarrassed.
That was the first thought you had was embarrassment.
Oh, well, I had been sleeping like that for weeks.
I know, but you would think
Yeah.
that it would be like, hey, can you help me? Can you help me find a place? But I think that sometimes you cling to dignity, even though, I don't know. I mean, I
Remember, my first non-paying job was a camp counselor at that park. I was a counselor for people much younger, but they never suspected that I was homeless. They never asked me, but for me, I had something to do during the day. It gave me purpose. It made me feel like I had siblings around me, even though that wasn't really the reality.
do you feel this need to connect deeply with people immediately to, like you said, you felt like you had siblings around you. Do you make people your family very quickly?
For me, holding on to friends has been the most difficult thing. For some reason, making friends has been a very difficult situation. It's not like I'm not social. But I think part of that is because I've moved so much that I haven't really been able to build a roots or a base. But I've been here for 2 years, so I still don't know what I'm not doing right.
Do you hold a high standard to people that you let into your inner circle?
Not a high standard. Obviously, I don't want them to be criminals. I don't want them to be drug users. Um, but I'm not too judgmental in that area. I do have my boundaries, of course.
What do you feel like would be the perfect, if you had a toolkit, a little box that you could give to every kid aging out, what would you put in that toolkit? What resources, what do you think would best serve those aging out? And maybe not just those aging out at 18, but to the age that you are now. You're in your 30s? Yeah.
I'm turning 36 soon, yeah.
Okay.
I know I look 25.
I was like, you look pretty young. Yeah. Okay, so.
I think that's a very important question. And I think the first things first, a foster child during the emancipation process should be put on food stamps automatically for at least the first year or two. you have a long transition period to get yourself off your feet. Like, that there is so much to learn and do before you should even be having to worry about that. Food stamps is the most important thing for a foster child who's going to be on his own. I think second, some type of job builds, skills building type program. You should be automatically enrolled in that. Unless you already are going to college or something, where you already have that already set up. I found out years later that there were tons of jobs and skills building programs. Just nobody ever offered it to me. So I think one of the biggest things in that process should be something like that. At least make sure they have a certificate in some field, whatever it is, whatever they want to do. They should be seen through to the end of that. I think secondly, a suitcase. A suitcase should be part of something that you take with you, especially if you're being kicked out of a home and going homeless. You should have essentials, skincare, hair care, antibacterial soap since you're going to be outside, warm clothes that if it's hot, you can be cool in, pictures of yourself. I didn't have any pictures of my childhood. You should have that. That should be a demand, that from your life, you have something to go back to feel safe. I think they also need to make sure you have identification. You have your birth certificate. You have a social security card. I had to learn how to get all of that. That was such a difficult process because I didn't have anybody in my life to prove, yes, this is him, I'll vouch, this is Michael Stroud. That just seems to me common sense. It should be automatic. And not only that, a child should be leaving the foster care system with enough money to put a down payment on a room for rent. And again, if I had this skills job building program in my life, I would have known how to go out and do a job. I remember the Job Corps was something that I had an option for, but they didn't let me sign up. And after that, I didn't even know where to go. I didn't have a car. I was in the middle of suburbia. There was no job.
I don't think they shouldn't have had an option. That should have been between you and the state. If they weren't willing to adopt you, they should not have a say in your future at all. And to stop that at that point seems like it should have been a red flag that just something else should have happened.
I don't blame her. I appreciate the work that she did, but she wasn't really working for me. She was.
Do you feel sometimes that you don't blame her because you're just a gracious person? Because I absolutely blame her. And I generally give people the benefit of the doubt, but I also know what social workers make. And for them not to be preparing people for aging out, I mean, I'm shocked that one of the things that you said, you just expect that they need to be homeless. I do not believe that. There has got to be an alternative to being homeless. I believe that the transition process should probably start when you're 16. At 16, you should have classes that are teaching you things like how to manage money. And they should be realistic. It shouldn't be blowing smoke. We are tough. We are strong. We've been through, every one of us has been through hell. Okay, that's just the honest truth. Homelessness costs our communities so much money, and in healthcare, in even in disease that gets carried out from there, right? I mean, there's so many different reasons. I loved what you said when you were posting, and you said healthcare should be about wage, not age. So I think general basic healthcare. But I think that everybody should be able to go to Walmart and get those same kind of glasses that will let them see. But the basics should be, I don't know. I mean, that's how I feel.
Taking advantage. It's about having the necessities to take care of yourself.
I think that if they started at 16, with this process of, look, at 16, your chances of being adopted are very slim. Some people get lucky and the right family comes and it's great for them. But for most of us at 16, we know the likelihood of getting adopted is not really possible. And they have, for everyone, there's this program, if you're college bound, there's support, there's a counselor to make sure that your grades are staying at a certain point, all of these things, if they decide that you're college bound. But there should be something for if you're aged outbound.
I agree. And back to your point about blaming the social worker.
Yeah.
Part of that was my fault. I felt like this was my family. I never wanted to turn on them. I never wanted to turn on them. I loved them. And to be honest, I still feel love for them. Back to the social worker, I assumed there were plenty of opportunities to tell her. I just never did. But something I remember is I never knew when the social worker was coming. My foster family knew, though. And it was so weird that there'd be a couple days where I'm treated so nice. And I never understood that. Oh, here's a soda. I never got sodas before, but randomly, here's a soda to enjoy. Oh, by the way, your social worker's coming over later today. You're going to say good things, right? Right. And I fell for it every time.
But that's not your fault. They conditioned you. And that's not your fault. That is they took advantage of you in such severe ways. I'm sorry. I'm super, super blunt about this kind of stuff, because what I end up telling so many people is, don't own things that aren't yours. We get to, we have so many mistakes in our lives that we are in charge of. You were being conditioned. What they were doing is beyond the pale. An 18-year-old should not be standing in a corner. Are you freaking kidding me?
Foster sister would have friends over for like an overnight.
Yeah.
Or family members would spend the night. They would always take off those gates. I had 2 baby gates right on top of each other. Like, I would have to kick them down to get out of there. They would take those down and the baby alarm, because they knew if anybody on the outside world saw this, they would know that it was wrong. If you know something's wrong, why are you doing it?
Right. And I think that that's an interesting question on why is it that people foster.
Yeah.
I think people foster for 3 reasons. If they have a majillion kids in their house, they're fostering probably for the money. But I think the one thing that people do, and maybe it's not even conscious, is that you foster for the approval of others. You foster to be on that pedestal, because it does put you on that pedestal. People look at you and they're like, oh, you're so wonderful. I hated that when we fostered.
So accurate what you just said, because if you knew this family, they're all about putting on a show. There are a lot of good foster parents out there.
Yeah.
And I bless them. I bless them with all of my heart.
But you didn't have one.
I wish I would have ended up with one of them. But it's my opportunity one day to become a foster dad when I'm ready. I'm not ready anytime soon, maybe in like 5 years. But I want to have a partner, before I raise foster kids, before I look into adoption. And it's so important for me. I know I could do it on my own. I'm not there yet, financially. But I will be. And I will end up in those shoes one day. And I can't wait, because I just know, I know in my heart what a good dad I'm going to be, and I know what not to do. I think that's the biggest thing. I know not what to do.
How do you handle the bad days, the bad times? Because it seems like loneliness would permeate a lot of your life.
But once I move to Chicago, I definitely plan to use my Medicaid to get counseling.
Good. Absolutely. Like, I believe that those resources are there to be stepping stones, and you got to, do what you can to be healthy, right?
I go through it every day. I have nightmares every other night. It affects affects my social life. I truly do. I don't think it's changed me trying to be a good person. I just think it's affected my trust with people. It's affected my stress levels. I truly believe to this day I have PTSD. It's easy to get people to give me the chance. Say, this is a good opportunity for you. But do I ever know how long I'm going to keep it? No. Because I'm so used to change. And I crave it.
That's not a foreign concept for foster kids. I think that's another thing that we can be taught is how to maintain something. I think that we can be very good at being chameleons. Manipulative is a harsh word, but like we've said multiple times in this interview, you have to do what you can to survive. So I love that you said that you still try to be a good person, because it takes a lot of work, to not be bitter. And because we could absolutely have these chips on our shoulders and try to do nothing and have lots of demands and to, be reliant on society because we've been through too much and we've been victimized. So I applaud that you have gone through so much and you're still striving to be that good person.
I've never given up on my dreams, I know that only hard work will get me there.
What would you say to your younger self?
I would say to never be ungrateful, to never give up. Always believe in yourself. I'd say that it's okay to not be okay. And it's okay to seek help. That you'll get through it. You'll get through it. Don't give up.
I feel like just that part about never being ungrateful is, I feel almost like armchair psychology completely, but it almost seems like Stockholm syndrome, because you absolutely had a reason to be ungrateful. Like if I could say something to the younger you, I would say advocate for yourself. Tell someone and tell someone and tell someone until they listen. Because no one should have to live the way that you did for 9 years? No one should have to do that. No one should have.
You're right. That wasn't my first instinct to say. To this day, I still want to forgive them. I'm sorry if I ever gave them a reason to be the way that they are, but that I still love them. But to this day, if they told me they were wrong and that they were sorry, I would forgive them in a second.
And I think that to me, that it just seems like they broke you. Because to want to have any kind of thing to do with them, I understand it. I understand that desperation for needing to belong to something. But they're toxic. What they was toxic. They broke a child. And yeah, I know that's not like, I should be saying, oh, forgiveness is beautiful, but I only really care. I'm like, it's sort of like there's all this crazy stuff going on in the world, and I've got one mission. My one focus is to help heal the people who need to be healed. And I feel like those people just need to have their license taken away because they're just breaking children for whatever reason, whether, for whatever reason she is like she is, to be able to have kids in her home when she's just breaking them is not okay. So, tell your little self something. I would just say love yourself enough to keep telling someone and tell someone and tell someone and tell someone and make them listen to you.
That's the most true statement. That is what I should have told my younger self. If I had known that, I think things would have been very different.